Alright, so we got another micro Cinewhoop here on the channel. This is from a new company called HOMFPV, and this one is called the Wingsuit. You can kind of see the name right there underneath the vibration dampener for the camera mount. Probably not the best place to print the name, maybe I'll move it later, but as you can see, it's called Wingsuit because the shape of the carbon plate here that holds the whole drone together is in the shape of one of those wingsuits that I guess people parachute with and can fly around. And I guess I've no experience with those, of course, but I think that's what this looks like. And this looks very familiar in terms of like similarity to a lot of other Cinewhoops out there. I think the most similar one is going to be the Beta 95 V2, the inverted pusher here, and you see this one also has the Vista, or in this case the Caddx Nebula camera, and so does the Wingsuit. It has the Caddx Nebula camera with the Vista, but this has the Caddx antenna, and the Beta 95 has the Beta FPV antenna. So slightly different camera mounting mechanisms, but similar concept to absorb jello or vibrations. And I have left my 95 V2 with the Insta360 Go mount as it originally came. I haven't done the naked GoPro modification of this one yet, and this one also only comes with the Insta360 Go mount. You can see here it's 3D printed TPU part here. Includes a M2 screw that goes all the way through this part here. So if you want to use a naked GoPro, you probably need to find a custom part here to match this mount so that it will go on top of here. It shouldn't be too hard to make one, but I may come around to it later. I haven't had time to make custom mounts for all these things because these models just keep coming in one after another. So while this does look very similar to the Beta 95X V2, there's quite a few differences. Other than the fact that it's inverted here and it happen to have the same Gemfan D63 propellers. The way the drone is put together here is quite a bit different. So each of these ducts here are individual ducts. Are prop guards. There's no like single plastic frame that holds everything together. Everything's held together via this carbon plate here, and all the screws that hold the motors onto the prop guards hold all that together, as well as these custom foam pieces here that go on the side. Little foam bumpers. It's going to be good for indoor spaces where you don't want to like bump into things and damage things or scratch them up. It doesn't really add a lot of weight, but yeah, that's another thing that the 95X doesn't have. And then the all-in-one board there, it's a 20 by 20 board, as you can see from the screw mounting holes. They're not the whoop style boards, and it's a custom all-in-one board. So it's a 20 by 20 board, but it's quite a bit bigger than a traditional 20 by 20 board, as you can see where all the motors are soldered on. So it's not using plugs, the motors are directly soldered on. It's an F4, I think it's a 405, so it has extra UARTs, and actually has an extra UART available free for GPS if you want to use a GPS. That's one thing that a lot of these 2.5-inch Cinewhoops, they don't have the extra UART available for GPS, so you can't add that on this one. And it's a single board versus two boards on the Beta 95X. Additionally, instead of 16 amps on the 95X, this one is I think 25 amps. So yeah, it's all around a much nicer in terms of electronics. That board there comes with a plug, of course, there for the Vista, so it just plugs into there, and then all the wires are directly soldered there, as you can see. And this one the Vista version comes with the receiver for the Vista wired up to the flight controller. So I was able to just run the DJI controller for this one. So if you happen to get this version and you want to use the Crossfire or some other receiver, you'll have to do some rewiring. It's going to be tricky getting in here. You're going to have to obviously take all the motors off with these screws to get inside. But I mean, and then of course get rid of this landing feature. That's another thing. There's a little 3D printer part here that gives you a little thing to land on other than the prop guards. So that's a bit better than the mini pusher that I reviewed a while back here. This one, you can see you're just landing on the prop guards here. So a lot of differences in all these different models. I'll have a roundup video at some point in the future, but if you have any specific questions, let me know down in the description. But because they did sort of, design this from the ground up, and using, parts that they wanted to use specifically for this design, there's a lot of things that are better on this one than some of the other older models. For example, as you can see right there, that board, that all-in board has a USB-C port, and it's accessible. So whereas on a lot of other models, the USB port is kind of hard to get to or tricky to get to, you might need a right angle adapter, or you might need to take some parts off to get access to that. No problem just getting that cable right in there. And it's USB-C, which is another plus. A lot of boards are still using the micro USB connector instead of USB-C. And then the other thing is on the Vista, the USB-C port for activation and firmware updates is also in a very good spot where they've oriented this. So really no complaints. A very nice design, very easy to set up. Took like literally like 10 minutes setting everything up. Where the components are and where the props are, it's a little bit, it's again like 95X, it is close. So you can see here where the camera wire comes, it's not like in any real danger of getting cut, but in a hard crash, this cable could come loose. So I may need to secure this in some way, perhaps tape it to the motor wire here, for example, something like that, just to make sure that it doesn't get into the prop. So there's little things like that. Some of the wires here are nicely twisted up and are out of the way, so it's not really in any serious danger of getting cut by the propellers. But in a hard crash, you never know what could happen. So the motors on here are interesting. They're just like the flight control board. They're made by Transtech. So I guess their acronym is TTRK. As you can see, the logo on the motor here, it's kind of like this, got this kind of burned gold purple color. It's kind of nice. And I think it's called Next Gen or Next is the name of the motor. It's 1106 4500 kV motor. Same kind of motor, same kV and size as on the 95X, and some other models have that as well. It's a pretty popular size for these 2.5 inch micro Cinewhoops. So I think that rounds up all of the electronics. There's no receiver in this one. Motors, a nice 25 amp 400 AC. I'm going to say 400 AC from the flight controller board all in one. And yeah, it's got an extra UART for GPS. No jello in the FPV feed here, because this is a pretty solid mount. It doesn't move at all. It's very stiff. Unlike, I think, some of you guys in the 95X, this mount here has some jello issues when you're flying around, because it's not quite as stiff. The TPU they're using here is not quite as stiff as on this model. So yeah, obviously the video on here is very smooth from the Insta360 Go. I did fly this around in some wind, so it is getting kind of pushed around a little bit. So you'll see that in the FPV feed, but on the Insta360 Go footage, it's pretty smooth. So obviously the stabilization from Insta360 does take out all of the little bobbles and bumps and stuff. They have the battery here in a sideways configuration, which is what I prefer, and I didn't have to change that. It came like that from the factory. I did fly with this Race Day Quads 654S, getting about 3 some minutes of flight time. They're saying about 7.5 minutes of flight time on an 854S Tattoo, so you probably want to go to a bigger battery if you want more flight time. Of course, you're going to be adding a lot more weight as well, but these motors can handle the weight no problem, even if you add a naked GoPro. Now, the pitching that's on here is pretty low rates. It's really like Cinewhoop rates, so I didn't really change anything. So you can't really do any flips or rolls. It's like 300 degrees per second or something like that. So the roll rate and pitch rate's really low, but it also at the same time lets you have much smoother flight, especially if you're trying to fly around like objects and into gaps and stuff like that where you need more control. It's not going to be overreactive when you're flying around with the rates that are built into the flight controller from the factory. All right, so let's get some weights here. And this is the wingsuit with no camera, just the camera mount, 139.7, and with the Insta360 Go. And we're coming in 158.2 with the 654S. Altogether, we're at 219.7, so yeah, well under the 250 gram limit. And even if you go to a slightly bigger battery and even the naked GoPro, you have another 30 grams there of leeway. That's one of the advantages of going to the 2.5-inch size, is you're not going to have to worry about registration versus on a lot of the 3-inch versions. You will probably have to register it in certain countries that require registration if you have a drone flying over 250 grams. Yeah, but again, so just the dry weight here, no camera or battery, it's about 140 grams. And then if you look at the 95X with the same Insta360 mount, it's infinitely lighter. It's 115 grams versus 140 grams. So a lot of things to consider there. And then the mini pusher here is probably even lighter. Yeah, if you want really light mini pushers, got you covered here. This is analog, of course, not DJI. And 1204 motors coming in at like 86 grams. And then I think the one with the biggest weight, or the most weight here, is the Diatone Taycan C25 with the same D63 propellers, but these have 1404 motors, not 1106. So this one here, this one's going to be really heavy. Let's put this on, let's see if it'll stay up. Okay, it's tricky getting it on the scale. Yeah, it's coming in at 188 grams. This one just come with the naked GoPro mount on here for this one. But yeah, like I think I flew this around with a 4S 850, no problem. Obviously, got the much bigger 1404 motors. But of course, yeah, had a lot more weight for this particular size. And then at this size here, it's you're pretty much close to the 3-inch size, so you're not going to be hitting any big gaps. So you can see how much more space this takes up compared to this one. And then when you go down to a smaller size where you get rid of the foam, from here to the 95X, you're reducing a lot of space. So if you're trying to get really tight gaps, then obviously you want to go for the ones with the smaller dimensions. I think it's 100 millimeters motor to motor on this one. So 95 millimeters on this one for the 95X. And then this one's just a little bit more at 100 millimeters. Anyway, I think it's going to cover for this model. I think I pretty much covered all the major differences between this one and some of the other ones that I reviewed previously, and perhaps some of the advantages. Obviously, with some of those advantages comes more weight. So if weight is a big concern for you, that could be an issue. Having a little more weight also does help with wind if you're worried about that. Lighter ones tend to be pushed around even more than something that's a little bit heavier than this one, but of course it's got some pretty big prop guards, so the weight isn't helping that much. I mean, it's only about 30 grams really between this one and some of the other ones, so it's not making that big of a difference, but it does help a little bit in terms of trying to fly outside in a little bit of a breeze. Anyway, here's some flight footage. If you have any questions, let me know, and I'll talk to you guys in the next video. Okay, so it's a little windy, and I'm flying a 4S 650 LiPo. Default PIDs, I haven't changed anything. It's gonna get bounced around a little bit in this wind. And I'm trying to not get it too close because it's going to be really loud. If you want less noise, then try a 3S battery. It's getting pushed around a little bit here in the wind.
It does feel a little bit on the heavy side compared to the 95X. Not quite as agile. And the rates on this are very low. They're Cinewhoop rates, it looks like. So I'm not going to be doing any flips or rolls. Yeah, you can see it getting bounced around. We'll have to see what the Insta360 Go footage looks like. It's probably completely smooth without any vibrations or wind jostling. Let's go a little higher. And I'm already at about 14 volts, so I'm going to go ahead and bring it in. Looks like the flight times are a bit on the shorter side with this heavier setup and 1106 motors. Let me know what you guys think.